They sound like
Okay.
pretty hot tonight.
You can go stereo.
I go stereo.
I think Jeff wants to make sure we're definitely following procedure. Should we start with a vote and just get that over with, or?
For chair and
Yeah.
vice chair? Sure.
Yeah,
And then we can be sitting in the right spot.
And certainly, introduce Sonia to you all. I'm sure we helped Tim. This is Sonia, Tim. And I mean, by procedure, you all in November were to have selected a new chair, co-chair, but given so many people going off, we bumped it ahead. And then I had simply offered, well, when we get, because I know we still have a new member to join us, and then we have two that aren't here this evening. So, but I don't want it to just linger out there. So it's certainly, you all are willing to make a motion to take action tonight. That's entirely up to you. Or not. You can simply start the meeting and we can move on.
I guess I'm technically the chair.
You are.
I am.
Not
Okay.
technically, actually.
I'm in no hurry to do it. I'd rather have a full house if we can do it. Anybody object to that concept?
Nope. Do you want to trade seats?
If you really, really, really want to. I was kind of enjoying sitting next to you.
I mean, I can,
I'm going to miss you.
or I can, either way, it doesn't matter.
It just, I mean,
You can pass the gavel.
I don't think it really matters.
Just know that they have to play funny music while you choose chairs.
All right, that was a waste of time.
All right, so I can tell Carl, as you all may be well aware, is really anxious to be the chairman.
I'm just anxious to get going.
Yes, no, you're right. So, okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. After presentations by staff and the applicant, members of the public will be allowed 2 opportunities to speak. Speakers shall identify themselves and give their current address. The chair will first ask for questions from the public, then from the bar. After questions are closed, the chair will ask for comments from the public. Members of the public will have, for each case, up to 3 minutes to ask questions and up to 3 minutes to comment. Comments should be limited to the BAR's jurisdiction, that is regarding the exterior design of the building and site. In other words, the BAR has no comments to be made regarding traffic and density and those sorts of things. Following the bar's discussion and before the vote, the applicant shall be allowed up to 3 minutes to respond for the purpose of clarification. Thank you for participating. Please note the times below are all approximate and hopefully will reflect the length of the meeting and when people are actually in front of us, but that can change depending on how long or short a given presentation is. So on the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the January 22nd regular meeting.
Actually, see if there are any matters from the public.
What's that?
Matters from the public.
Oh, matters from the public. Yeah, sorry. Skip that one. Matters from the public. Anybody have something they want to bring up that's not on the agenda? Not much public here tonight, but okay. All right, so now we'll get on to the consent agenda. And first item being the minutes from the January 22nd regular meeting. I wasn't there, so does anybody have any comments regarding the minutes?
I actually do have a quick comment on the minutes. Where it's bold on the first page, says meeting was called to order at 5:30. It says Mr. Ball, the vice chair, was not in attendance. Must be Mr. Moore. You are you were the, yeah.
Right.
Anyways.
Right.
So a quick correction to that.
Yep.
See it?
Yes.
Okay.
So with that correction, Mr. Chair, I move that the minutes be accepted.
Any a second? Anybody want a second?
I'll
that?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? I recuse myself because I wasn't there. All right, so now we go on to next on the consent agenda. Actually, I guess
Should be three items.
we have the certificate of appropriateness application for 425 West Main, and then 1115 Hazel and 581 Dice Street, correct? and new starts with South Street. So first up is the 425 West Main. Any comments, questions?
I want to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
In its entirety.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And the ayes have it. Okay, so new agenda. The first item is item 5, which is certificate of appropriateness application for 108 110 West South Street. West South Street LLC owner, Christy Haskin, Woodard Properties applicant. This is with regard to a tree removal.
We've discussed this property a couple times in the last couple months, so I'll try to move through it quickly, but this is 108 110 West South Street, built around 1922, 1923. It is a contributing structure in the downtown ADC district. It's known as the former Hankins Warehouse. And it's a 2-story, 3-bay building clad in stucco. And the request actually is related to a tree on the parcel boundary and at the rear of the adjacent property to the west. And so this is a request for a COA to remove 2 maple trees, one straddling the parcel line between 108 110 West South Street and 200 West South Street, and the other is at the rear. And in the information that was submitted, it's trees number 1 and number 4 are the ones they wish to remove. Staff in discussion offers that in addition to the applicant's submittal, review the photos of the subject trees in the appendix of the staff report, and Robert took photos and inserted those into the report. There are 2 other trees that are shown, and those were approved. Those are the ones growing right up against the building, and you all approved their removal last August. Should the BAR decide to approve the request, the board might consider recommending the planting of new trees, something that's an appropriate species off the city's master tree list. Also available, the BAR might consider separate actions for each tree. And with that, I know Christy is here. Do you have any questions for me? And I'll forgot to push the button.
Press it, it's the 4th side.
There we go.
Do you have anything you want to say?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, I would say. Okay, do we have any questions from the public? Questions from the bar? Comments from the public? Comments from the bar?
I find the application is pretty convincing. Probably, in totality of the 4 trees, the maple to the front is probably the only one that might have been planted intentionally, and it's in pretty poor condition. The silver maple in back is, at first I wondered if it might be in better condition, but the arborist report was pretty convincing, and certainly silver maple is of somewhat limited value. I do think that considering the amount and number of trees being removed, I think there should be or could be a recommendation for exploring the possibility of other plantings. I'm not sure, we haven't looked at the site plan to see what that possibility might be, and perhaps maybe that's a form of a question to the applicant. But so if space were available, I think that it would be appropriate to recommend additional plans for a canopy tree to be located on site. I would think up to 4, certainly 4 trees would be appropriate if possible. I would think 2 from the large or medium-sized tree list from the city would be appropriate.
I have a question. Carl, you might know the answer to this, but Kristen might also. The power lines there, were those slated to be buried when the project across the street was going in?
I don't think so. Yeah.
They're just there until Dominion sees otherwise. Okay.
And all the communication companies.
Yeah, and then all the communication. So, I mean, because that just makes that location all by itself pretty problematic for anything even remotely resembling a tree. So, okay. Any comments, Jody? Any questions?
I mean, I agree with Breck. I find it unfortunate because it is, I think, the only street tree on the street, that entire stretch. And personally, I tend to think that even if a tree's been, butchered like that, it still has an aesthetic value. But I recognize that it is also compromised because it's rotting and it's definitely fully coming back to life right now. But there's a lot of cracked branches, and so I get that. I don't know how we would want to handle the.
Can we pose that as a question to the applicant of what the possibility for other trees on the property may be?
At this point, we're willing to explore the approved list and work with our neighbor to come up with a good solution. And I mean, aesthetics are definitely going to be taken into consideration, and
Yeah, because the South Street Hotel actually really has more space for actually putting in a tree than you guys do.
we would have to, it's actually all their property, so we'd have to work closely with them to figure out a solution.
Right.
The tree commission puts out information about not only recommended canopy trees, but also understory trees for places that have utilities above. So you might check their website and their information for the recommendations.
So, I mean, I guess.
Maybe you could.
I guess the question is, it sounds like we're going to approve the trees coming down. Are we going to make it contingent on a plan to put them back, or are we?
I'd be more inclined to say a recommendation, and we would like, because you haven't really we haven't really seen anything in the way of any sort of site plan improvements for this site, right? It's really all been about the building.
Right.
And I'm trying to recall, are there any doors or is there a pathway going down the side of it?
Kind of a de facto path. It's not.
Is it cut through or is it?
Service.
Is there actually circulation going down that side of the building? So there is a sidewalk?
It's a small retaining wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the trees are in such bad shape, I can certainly see why they would come out, but I could also see that we would request, a future plan to come in that would include a site. We would like to see a site plan that addresses tree cover and planting in that area. And that's partially going to have to be in concert with the South Street people, we realize that. But just with, that the tree definitely gave some character to that end of the street, even though it's a mess. And I think having that sense of green there would be a real shame to lose it, but I totally understand why those trees aren't any good. So I think we would have a motion that would ask that they return at some future date with a site plan suggesting how they would repopulate that area in terms of trees and vegetation. But I don't think it's a contingency, I think it's a request.
Okay.
What's that? Oh, if you have a question, you have to come ask for it formally.
So we were hoping so we understand the contingency. Is it possible to remove the trees and come up with a site plan?
Yes, I was thinking we weren't going to
simultaneously?
do it as a contingency, but rather a request for future.
Okay,
So no requirement.
great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. So I can take a stab at this motion.
Yeah.
Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the city design guidelines for site design, I move to find that the proposed tree removals satisfy the BAR's criteria and are compatible with this property and other properties in the ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted, with the following recommendation: that the applicant work with the adjacent landowner and come back to the BAR at a future date with a site plan and that addresses the loss of vegetation, and recommends the replacement of at least 4 trees on site, 2 of which should be from this tree, Charlottesville's tree list for large or medium deciduous trees.
Little discussion on the motion.
Yes.
Would it be possible, Jeff, for that site plan, so that it doesn't become a whole nother application, it become a hindrance, to be something that potentially they could submit to go on the consent agenda as part of this application?
As an addendum.
Yeah. So it's not on a whole nother formal process.
You know, I would do as we've done in the past, because I need to talk to Brian about the site plan requirements, but that it's just simply indicated, and then I'd probably bring it to you as sort of for the record, you know, not necessarily consent, but you know, so that you're aware of it. Now there may be a requirement that if it's a site plan change, that you all would look at it, but I think there.
Perhaps we
I
could
don't
call
think
it a
that this would
planting
trigger a
plan.
site plan amendment or of any sort.
Yeah, I think this, I don't,
Call it landscape
I
plan?
think you're.
Let's
yeah,
call it
I-
a landscape plan.
Landscape plan.
You've expressed the okay to remove the tree, which is the request, and you've expressed that you would like to see a plan. You haven't required it, you're requesting to see a plan to put trees back. And then Christine and I can talk about
Okay.
that, and I'll talk to the planner about what needs to be done.
But I think Brett, or Carl is correct, that we should refer to it as a landscape plan, not a site plan. We're not trying to initiate a site plan review process. We're just saying we'd like you to take it a little bit further, and it does mean they have to work with the neighbor, so.
Yeah. I'm also just trying to avoid having another meeting be a hindrance. I'd rather have it just be really easy to happen,
You know, and then, you know,
if it could.
then, you know, just simply make the motion as, provide, information indicating the plan to, revegetate, something like that.
Okay. So I think we can keep the motion as is, just replacing site plan with landscape plan.
Yep. Anybody care to second the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, next is 109 East Jefferson Street, Christopher and Caitlin Henry. Jeff Dreyfus, I don't see Jeff Dreyfus, so there must be somebody coming in Jeff Dreyfus's place.
There we go. Tim Tessier with Bushman Dreyfus. Jeff couldn't be here tonight.
All right.
Yes, we're talking Social Hall, 109 East Jefferson Street. We're looking to replace the gate that is existing that you see in the photos. And the request from the owner was to come up with something that provided just a little bit more privacy. As you can see in some of the other photos, the service entrance, service gates are of the same design as what's on the front, so something a little more special in keeping with the front entry was desired. I did want to mention we submitted, I think you have the updated drawings because we submitted a little update with the section and that perspective.
Anything else you want to add?
I don't have anything else to add other than what's in the drawings. I'm happy to answer questions.
Is there another drawing besides this one?
That's the, we put the basic up there for the discussion.
We're good. Okay, so any questions from the public? No public. Okay. Any questions from the board?
Are is the intention to make the front walk usable again? It's currently barricaded.
I believe so. Yeah, I think there are planters on the steps.
Yeah.
This would turn into an official entry. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think you can see in the photos that there are some planters.
And the design appears fairly transparent. Is that accurate? They look like they're maybe 1.5 inch or similar size vertical post with a wider space in between. Is that
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We envision it just as you see it in the drawing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm guessing that the intention is to have the standing position be closed rather than open.
Correct. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Is the beware of dog sign going on the gate?
I don't believe that's going back on the gate, but I can't say for certain.
Any more questions? Anybody? No. Comments from the non-existent public? Comments from the board? Carl, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I'm struggling with this a little bit because we do have a guideline that fences in the front yard could be no more than 4 feet.
Right.
I tried to look at the past history of this site, and it does not appear that the arborvitae hedge ever came to the BAR, the one that's in the front along Jefferson Street. I don't know if you know any history of that.
I don't believe we have discussed it in our office or with the owners, so
Because you guys had done the previous
we
applications,
did.
right?
Yeah. And I think what was there
Mhm.
remained from what was there before, so.
It just back in, well, when this was approved, I know there was discussion of, it was good to have the privet hedge there because it would hide the fence. I'm not sure there was ever any discussion about the privet hedge becoming 10 feet tall. It's a fairly hostile sidewalk. It's kind of unfortunate when you look at pictures from not so long ago and see what it looks like today. So that's why I think the design is very nice. I think it would be improvement to get rid of the planters that are on the steps and be able to actually see the front door from the street. And I think you'd be able to see through the gate. But I'm still struggling with the whole idea of having a 6-foot wall right there, which it's the lowest point of that gate is at 6 feet. So I don't know I'm curious where the rest of the board is on this, but this is, yeah, I mean, I kind of wish, if your client has bought a house downtown and, is proud of his house and would be proud to cut the hedge down to an appropriate size so that, he could actually, he's got a lot of
Yeah.
privacy in the backyard.
We noticed the comment from the staff about that. I think there's flexibility for, I think trimming, shaping the plantings that are there would be fine, acceptable.
If I could offer, one of the things that when you think about the hedge being lower, this gate opens out into the sidewalk. So without line of sight, without some awareness that someone's at the gate, someone walking by, the collision is easy to imagine. So somewhat we were seeing that if this were lower, then that doesn't become an issue. You see someone at the gate that's ready to come out, or you see someone on the sidewalk. So I don't know if that helps, but otherwise there is a question of it's extending out into the public. Right?
But isn't the gate, when open, isn't it flat against the cheek wall of the,
No,
does it project into the?
It projects,
It does.
it projects
does?
further than the hedge.
Oh,
It does, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a good point, Jeff.
I'd say it
Oh, that's true, because it's in the center of it, you're right.
projects at least a foot, maybe 14 inches, 16 inches.
It's because the steps keep
The steps,
coming down.
right, the steps prevent it from swinging in. So it actually repeats what is there now. The gates would swing to
Into
the
the-
same dimension of
Right.
what it is now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the design is elegant and a good addition generally to the site. I do think it has been designed in scale with the existing hedge at the height that it is now, and I've been asking myself the question about whether lowering it to a height that would allow the hedge to also be maintained at a more in keeping with the spirit of our guidelines, if that would destroy the proportion of it. And I think it could take a little. It is very tall in the drawings that show a human figure. It is pretty large scale for a 5-foot wide sidewalk.
I mean, it seems like you could probably bring it down a foot and still have the sense of the soaring arch. I mean, the house itself is extremely vertical. You got all the stairs. It just piles right up pretty fast. So I think having a vertical gate makes a great deal of sense.
Right. That's kind
So
of
in
the
terms
scale
of
I
its
was thinking.
relationship to the house, it makes sense the way it is, but I think you could experiment with shortening it.
If it were, that was about the dimension that I was looking at, and that would allow the hedge to be maintained, say, at a 6-foot level. Top portion is always going to be a little bit lighter than, it might be a huge improvement generally for the site.
It also would, I think it would just help, it would help with that street scale a little bit. But I think, dropping the gate considerably and leaving that way up there, you kind of lose a lot of the purity of your design, which isn't so great. So I think, from my perspective, the design is appropriate to the house and it's elegant, but I think you could lose some height. And I hear what you're saying, Carl, as far as the height of the hedges and that kind of thing. We wrestled with that over on Park Street where
Yeah.
people were trying, in that case, it was also 5 feet or 6 feet on top of a bank, on top of.
Well, this is, so what's
Somewhat
not
similar.
showing up in the drawings is an arborvitae hedge that was, I'm not sure ever got approval, that runs right behind this privet hedge.
Ah.
So eventually that'll be an even taller wall,
Got it.
which, yeah, and I don't know, maybe it got administratively approved. There's no record of that, that I could dig up at this point. But it does seem like there's a definite desire to wall off this house from the park, which, I suppose I understand from if you want to sit in your front porch and have privacy, but at the same time,
But on
it's,
the other hand, that porch is way up there.
yeah, it is.
So it's kind of
Like a
moot.
garden.
moot. I think, I'd just like to see, I think I'm with Breck, I think drop it a foot perhaps, see how that works, but then really hold the line as far as the height of that hedge is concerned from here on out. And keep that down to at the max at the hinge height, top of that hinge there.
I think that would be acceptable.
The apex of your,
Right.
ellipse.
And I think the client, we would just have some discussions about how much does the gate actually provide any privacy. But granted, the steps, as you're coming down the steps, you're already above the gate anyhow. So
Right.
I think we could work with losing a foot on the height of the whole assembly.
Right.
Architecturally, we'd want to keep the proportions of
Totally
the ellipse
understood.
and all of that.
Totally
So,
understood.
yeah.
Oh, I like the design, the way it picks up the ellipse, the fan light at the front door. But I know that in the planning commission, we have guidelines and we work very hard to engage the public who's walking along the sidewalk with whatever's on private land. And that's either through stores, open glass storefronts. We don't allow parking on the main level because of the lack of engagement with the pedestrian. Just has a similar situation. We're asking pedestrians to walk by an urban site and walling them off from that site. So I'm all in, I agree with my colleagues about the strong recommendation to reduce the height of the hedge.
How old is that hedge? Like 8 years, maybe?
The privet, I think, has always been there, just was kept much lower.
And the RB went in when the house was
It went in a couple years ago.
renovated?
So it was, looking at Google Street View, it went in after all the other site improvements were put in 2012. So I think the last application that this project saw was 2011. October of 2012, the hedge is still low and there's no arborvitae behind that. Sometime between then and now, it's in. They don't look very old. They're maybe 4 or 5 feet tall and still kind of skinny. They haven't joined together like the ones in the back.
Right. Well, so
I
I think a reasonable compromise is, as I think we're all headed toward, is drop it a foot and keep that hedge right down there with it.
kind of feel like we're designing a gate around a hedge.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like it's the hedge is sort of the pre-existing condition, I guess, is the way the gate went for that, right?
Yeah.
Or you push, I mean, the thing is, if you're, I think it'd be problematic to get that, say, to get that bottom of that down to 4 feet, because then the verticality of the, kind of compromises the verticality of the architecture of it. I mean, perhaps we ask them to push the hedge down more, but I think the gate, if you come down much more than a foot, I think you're gonna have issues with how it responds to the scale of the house and all that sort of thing. It would be interesting to see what the approved hedge height was, though, back when the house was done,
I don't think it was,
ever addressed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would guess that the gate was submitted. I don't know that anything was done about the hedge at that time.
There's a fence buried in between the privet and the arborvitae, and I think that came up. And yeah, the idea was that the hedge would obscure the fence. But the fence is maybe, it's up a little higher, and I think it's maybe 3 feet tall on top of maybe 18 inches of hillside, or from memory, I'm trying to, something like that.
Yeah, in our section, we show the existing metal fence just kind of behind this gate on the uphill side.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that height that's seen there is roughly accurate. It's not a very nice looking fence.
Yeah, it's just a black metal.
Right.
Yeah.
So it looks pretty close to 6 feet relative to the sidewalk, because it's up, right?
Yeah, on the
Assuming that's
elevation
correctly
next to it,
drawn.
I've drawn a line at the top of the I don't know if you see the figure there, but that's a 6-foot line, so I would say that that existing metal fence is
It's right
right around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think, we're concentrating on the gate, and we'll ask you to, we'll request that the hedge be brought down with the gate level. And then if there's a fence there that's already in place, that kind of makes it problematic to drive much farther than that. Does anybody care to make a motion? Oh, actually, let's see, sorry. Did we went through comments for public comments for a second? Yes, I think we did all that. All right.
I'll take a stab. Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including city design guidelines for site design, I move to find that the proposed gate satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the downtown ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted with the following modification: that the gate structure be reduced in scale by
Or height.
the
Reduced
height.
in height.
The height is reduced by around 12 inches, and that the adjacent hedge be maintained at a height of 5 to 6 feet.
From the
Second.
sidewalk? I think it comes down to the sidewalk. So
I think I'm going to suggest that measured at relative to the gate structure itself. The grade changes
Relative
around
to
the
the
site.
upper hinge of the gate, which is, so that would give you, I don't know what that is, that's probably what, 8 or 9 inches there between the bottom of the ellipse and the top of the hinge? Something like that.
I think it might be a little more than that. The midpoint of the ellipse is about 2 foot 2 inches, or actually 2 foot 3 from the top of that. The bottom of the ellipse to the midpoint of the ellipse is about 2 foot 3 or something like
Got
that.
it.
Yeah.
I think suggesting that it's 5 to 6 feet relative to this structure is probably good. We all
Yeah.
know how hedges tend
Right.
to
Do their
get
thing.
a little taller.
Yep.
So relative to the, okay, yeah, to the bottom of the structure. So at 6 feet, it would be, or at 5 feet, it would be level with the bottom of the ellipse. And, okay.
But it'd be springing up above it somewhat, right? Unless they're, because if they're keeping it sort of open top like that rather than a clip top, depending on how you print it.
So before you vote, just for my clarification, we talk about a foot, essentially taking the curve at the top, that's all, I mean, the gate and at the trellis, that's all shifting down 1 foot, all sort of together. All right. It's not the trellis getting shorter, or just the
No,
gate
no,
getting
the
shorter.
whole assembly is shortening by a foot,
I understand that.
or whatever that module is probably, which looks like it might be a foot.
That makes sense.
Anybody want to second it?
Jody did.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, sorry. Okay, so in that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Great for the honest. All right. We're gonna make that game, aren't we?
Not if you keep saying that.
I only said it once. Come on. All right. Okay, quickly, and it's Bushman Dreyfus night. So next up is a COA request for 751 Park Street. And by the way, before I forget it, can you guys remember all these? Tear down the advertising sign out on the telephone pole, if you can recall. All right, so 751 Park Street. It's in the North Downtown ADC district. Was constructed in 1904. It is a contributing structure within the district. 751 Park is the only frame colonial revival dwelling on Park Street. It's a 2-story, 3-bay house. Is oriented east towards Park Street and has a porch that spans the front facade. The building has an impressive classical cornice and an asymmetrical slate roof. Its primary hip volume is interrupted by several gables, dormers, and extensions. And the house was built for William J. Keller, a prominent shoe merchant in Charlottesville. Back in 2009, the BAR did review some demolition, also in June 2010, some demolition requests, replacement of the siding with aluminum siding, or I don't know whether it was replaced or it was placed over the top. We can address that. The addition of shutters, railings, some lattice, and the removal of the porch or this side entrance that's in question was approved, but that COA is long expired. So the request before you is for the removal of a porch and stair at the north elevation. This replacing the door on the north porch with a new vinyl clad window, and on the entire house replacing the siding with fiber cement lap siding. As I said, you all the BAR back in 2009 reviewed alterations to the building's exterior, including the removal of the north porch and replacing its window with a door. The applicant also proposes with this replacing the house's aluminum siding and presumably the original wood siding underneath, if any still remains. That would be, the new siding would be the fiber cement material. In 2010, when aluminum siding was removed to make way for a new west porch addition, the original siding was uncovered, but had considerable deterioration, and as a result, it was replaced with the same fiber cement cladding that is now proposed for the rest of the house. Submittal does not indicate whether or not any existing wood siding remains, and that would be underneath the current aluminum siding, and if it does, whether or not that will be removed or left in place. The design guidelines recommend the repair of deteriorated wood siding and to replace only when it is beyond repair. Staff recommends further investigation to the original siding's condition before its wholesale replacement. While enough old siding for all facades may not be salvageable, consideration should be given to reusing original material on a complete facade if that's possible. Additionally, should the new siding be installed over existing wood, the BAR should request clarity on how the siding will fit dimensionally with the existing trim elements. We discussed this earlier in preliminary meeting about how, if the original wood is there, it's going to be left. How does that affect where the new would come into the window trim, up top at the cornice, things like that. Regarding the demolition of the north entry and the stairs, Staff did review it relative to the demolition guidelines that are in the design guidelines, and you can certainly review that. One of the questions is, was this original? We know from a 1929 Sanborn map that it was there at that time. The Sanborn maps do not go this far north on Park Street until then, so we really don't have a record, but we can assume it was at least there in 1929. Question about whether it's on the National Register and the Virginia Landmarks Register, and 751 Park Street is listed as contributing structure to the Charlottesville and Albemarle County Courthouse Historic District. We also know it as the North Downtown ADC District. However, those listings were in 1980 and 1982, and the district survey has not been updated, and it is unknown how the prior alterations or the proposed would impact the current designation. To ask whether or not the building or structure or any of its features represent an infrequent or first or last remaining example within the city. We do know that the house is unique, being the only frame colonial revival dwelling on Park Street. Staff's not been able to determine if it's unique to the city of Charlottesville. The question of whether or not the structure is an old or distinctive design, texture, material that could not be reproduced, or it could be only with great difficulty. Staff notes that the requested demolition is for a component of the house. While the house is unique, a covered side entrance is not, and with proper documentation, this element could easily be replicated later should that be pursued. It asks the degree to which distinguishing characteristics, qualities, features, etc. Staff writes that while the historical record indicates in a plan view that a covered side entrance at this location existed, staff cannot determine if the materials or the design are original. Question about is the structure linked historically or aesthetically to other buildings within an existing major design district? And the truth is, this house is relatively unique, if not unique, to Park Street. The overall condition and structural integrity of the building or structure, unable to determine that. Whether or not and to what extent the applicant proposes moving, removing, demolishing, will any of the features remain? No, the existing side entrance will be removed entirely. So there's sort of the pros and cons to that. I think we had some discussion about this. It's, I think, to be determined whether or not, like I said, these changes or even the prior changes would still have its designation as contributing in the historic district. I have to assume it would. But the removal of this side entrance, as we discussed, probably is an element that was important to this house. One option would be to retain the side, and I know that the intent is to create some space on the interior. The door could be replaced, the entrance could be retained. There's a couple options. I will also say, excuse me, get a little froggy here, but if there are questions, you all can defer this to next month and request some additional information. That's your prerogative. Any questions?
Okay, so, Tim.
It's me again. Tim Tessier, Bushman Dreyfus Architects. Yeah, so we are definitely looking to have that side entrance removed based on the prior application. I think that's clearly the first goal. I think the siding question is one that we acknowledge may require some more investigation. I know when the work was done at the now back porch, the wood that was discovered there was in really poor condition. That, just to confirm, that wood was actually removed, and hardy siding was put back in its place. I think our starting position would be in the owner's interest in terms of getting and opening a can of worms here with the siding. I think what the idea would be is that the old wood siding, if there is any, is likely in poor shape, that I think we would take that off and go back with new hardy plank. I think there are challenges with going on top of wood siding with hardy plank. I think the manufacturer asks for a smooth, solid surface as a starting position. I think furring strips could be used, but then you've pushed the face of the siding beyond a lot of the trim elements that are there. So I think, in the order of priority, we want to look first at the side entrance and make sure that that can be removed. There is a powder room behind that, what is now a door.
Is that an existing powder room?
It's there now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's there now.
Sorry, what was the question?
I just wondered if it was an existing powder room, if it was,
Yes,
if it was there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So a door would not be wanted.
Right, right.
Yeah, and so that would be the first order of business, and then if that's acceptable, then we could talk about the siding issue if patching that area is okay or anything beyond that. We do want to speak for the owner he's here, so he can speak for himself too, but we don't want to get into an exploration project where we start quantifying good, bad siding and having to I think the cost would start to skyrocket for the whole siding exercise. Happy to answer questions.
Questions from the public? Nope. Questions from the board? I do have one immediate question. What, the other windows on the house are wood frame or aluminum clad now?
They are vinyl clad.
They are vinyl clad.
We wanted to keep these, the existing style of window, and we were able to find a window that would fit into the spaces, so that they're still the original style that would surround.
It's interesting that it's got vinyl clad windows.
I mean, they were, I'm sure, a replacement at some point.
Right,
That-
right. I was just wondering more about its sort of BAR designation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, when that was done?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's there right now? All the other windows currently are vinyl clad?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Tim, do you
And then they
know?
have wood trim. They're vinyl clad with like a nailing fin and then just the original wood trim, or they have some sort of a pack, so
They're
they're...
the original.
I would assume those are replacement packs with
Yeah.
original trim. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know if the exterior walls are insulated, and if that's going to play into the siding question?
From a technical perspective, moisture, I'm not sure. Patrick, do you know?
If the exterior walls are insulated?
I've lived in the house since 2009. At that point, it hadn't been touched since the Nixon presidency, and we did a lot. We did inject stuff in the walls.
Okay.
And the windows are double glazed, so it's much more energy efficient than it ever was.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yep.
Also tells you when the windows got replaced.
Hmm?
Also tells you when the windows got replaced.
Yes, it does.
Will fiber cement do that curve on
Yes.
the curve portion? Okay.
It should.
Well,
And
I was looking into that, and it does, while it can curve, it can't bend and curve, so there are some issues with it packing out over
Mm-hmm.
a vertical distance. So it'll be something you got to sort out
Mm-hmm.
if it's approved.
You mean as you're trying to lap it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know how you did the portion where you did replace the siding. I see you've got a couple of pictures, but are you going to put corner boards on, or
We
what's
would likely put corner boards on, just to resolve those corners. We don't anticipate a architectural dimensioned
Mhm.
plank
Okay.
to be mitered in those conditions.
So can you explain again which area y'all already replaced with some of that hardy plank and?
Sure,
what
so,
you said you found some condition of the original wood trim or siding?
So the porch you see to the right, which is at the back of the house, I think if you have your staff report, it would be the last photograph. It's the porch on the right, and actually if you have our set of drawings, you can see a close-up on our page 7, the very last page with our photos.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good representation in the bottom left corner where the photo that says existing siding. What is to the right of that pilaster was the replacement siding, the hardy siding, and what's to the left is the aluminum siding.
Okay. And the condition of the wood beneath it, you said it was just all shot?
It was rotted out. We could not use it.
And was the original siding the same proportion or size?
That's a good question. Are you asking if the original wood siding
Yes.
was of the same dimension? I believe it was,
Okay.
but I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be ascertained with looking at what's underneath. And an identical situation at my house, and my house wasn't insulated. Removing allowed us to do the insulation to, you really can seal up the house doing it this way. And so if that is the case, I would suggest putting that in your specs. But, if identifying a condition underneath the metal, or to have a lap that matches the existing, if that's, critical, you could include that in the motion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it seems like the cyber cement siding that you installed here was intended to match the aluminum siding.
Right.
And so if we're moving forward, would we want to match the historic siding?
I think we need to know what the historic siding is, and I don't see that it would be an incredible hardship to take off a 5x5 area, do some probes on different sides of the house to find out what kind of condition it's in, and B, what does it look like? Do we know that it's all square edge? Do we know that we'd like to know what the size is?
How much to the weather?
Yeah. I'm not surprised I would not be surprised that the rear of the house would be more deteriorated than the other areas or other elevations of the house.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah, well, and so we keep talking about it's possible. It wouldn't be that difficult to go out there and do some probes and find out.
So the existing siding is aluminum, so I'm imagining a scenario where taking off 5x5 chunks of that is going to be difficult to sort of go backwards and get it back. But I think.
Why do you need to get it back if you're going to replace the siding?
Well, I think speaking for the owner who's here, I think he would rather leave everything that's there if it becomes an operation to explore and start taking a bunch of pieces.
The original motivation for doing this is that I figure that it's time to get rid of the porch, which it doesn't really have any reason for being, and I'm not sure it ever really did. I mean, I spent quite a lot of time discussing it with Professor Bluestone, who was my neighbour. He had a certain notoriety in conservation circles in Charlottesville, and we couldn't work out why that door was there anyway.
Even without the powder room inside of it? It doesn't make sense as having an access to the open stair hall?
There's a powder room under the stair now. It didn't really make any sense before because, I mean, the house was set up, the southwest corner was set up for servants. There was a servant's stairway, there was a servant's room, there was a servant's entrance in the back. The only reason we could think of that there would be an entrance into the house on that side was that the owner didn't fancy walking around the front. He wouldn't have allowed staff to go in and out of that little door. I don't think they'd have been required to go in through the back. So, you know, the house, the interior is no longer designed to have limited staff. It's more open, and so there never was a lavatory on the ground floor. So and there needed to be one. So that's why there's a powder room there now. So I mean that's the background to wanting to complete that adjustment. My feeling was that this might be an opportunity to get rid of the horrible aluminum siding and replace it with something that would improve the look of the house. I don't believe that doing this will make one iota of difference to the livability of the house, or for that matter, to the value of it. But given that we were coming back to the board to ask about to get permission again to the removal of this porch, it seemed like a good opportunity to explore the idea. Does that make sense?
So when,
No, because I disagree with the removal of the porch. I think the porch has a very good reason for being on this service side. It's the access for off the road, the side road. It's a street elevation. The porch is ornamented. It's clearly was designed to be a feature, albeit not the main feature facing Park Street, but it was still facing a street and
Yes.
elaborated, and the builders, the original owners, were proud of it. They
Yes.
wanted it to see.
It was the access from the side street. You're absolutely right. But now the house has been reconfigured with this entrance on the back.
Mhm.
That is the access from the street now, and it's we actually moved the door into the centre of the house so that it's not tucked away in the back, and it's a very good entrance. It's a much better entrance.
But just because you rearrange things in a modern sense doesn't mean that then we can start taking off the historic things that don't matter anymore. I mean, that we throw out our guidelines. They still matter.
Yeah.
And they still read, I mean, it helps the house, it helps understand the house historically, how it developed. And one day, when, in the future, someone may want to take that powder room out and restore that, that entrance to the hall.
And not have a loo on the ground floor? I doubt it, so. It's a sort of basic, it's a basic one, right?
Well, I'm sure they can find other places for the loo on the ground floor.
I have a question.
No, otherwise we would have done.
I have a question. Is it the porch or is it the door that is the bigger issue?
It's the porch. I'm happy to leave the door there. Well, I'm happy to do whatever you say, obviously.
So I guess,
I mean, in certain respects, having a window into the powder room isn't necessarily a major advantage.
so I guess, and you were talking about livability of the house. How does removing the porch improve livability of the house?
Well, it's just surplus to requirements at this point. It's a porch going nowhere because the door is nailed shut and has had heat insulation put up against it. So yeah.
it's fundamentally vestigial, I think is
Because
the
I mean,
question.
if the door were the issue, or light in the bathroom, or otherwise, we have had situations where we've left a framed opening in place or installed window within the opening that's reversible, that could
And
have
I'd be fine with that.
It would be interesting to know whether, from a framing standpoint, whether the door was there or whether you could tell there used to be a window there. I don't know, but because when you go to take that siding off, you probably find out what's really going on behind it.
Yeah, I think it'd be acceptable to explore the siding in this area here. At that.
Right, well, yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that would be fine.
Because you'd be talking about replacing it anyway.
Yeah.
And then that might reveal the fact that it's got a wider weather or something like that, at which point then you'd have to decide whether you really want to take the aluminum off or not. When you said the insulation, is it spray in like foam or cellulose or fiberglass or?
I think fiberglass.
Fiberglass, okay. So it does breathe to some extent. I was just wondering also about the aluminum and whether that's causing any kind of moisture problems in the back of the wall.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when the house was not insulated.
Right.
Yeah.
You may also,
Even so, you still end up with a dew point right behind it. What's that?
Right.
I was going to say, in terms of an exploratory probe, you may also be able to kind of remove that corner piece where the aluminum siding comes together
Right.
and just basically peel back right there without
Right.
having to remove a huge piece and get a view back behind it.
Exactly, and I think what I was speaking to earlier is if it's really to start to quantify how much siding is okay versus not, I think that's the exploration that the owner would prefer not to have to do. So the aluminum would likely just stay at
But I
that.
think if you're doing any kind of modifications to that, you're
To
going to
that.
find out. That's certainly going to give you a clue
Right,
what's going on there.
sure.
If I could offer too, I mean, removing it doesn't need to be something that's done, ahead of time, but I think that a condition, and again, I'm reflecting on work that I've done and certainly at my own house, but the corner board is one question. I've seen where in Charlottesville where it's 2, I've seen a lot of places it's 1. You would likely have a clue to that as that siding was removed. I'm curious about the trim condition where the curved face comes into the flat, and is there a piece there maybe that mimics the corner? I don't know, but again, if I could just offer that in any requirements, is that maybe there are some unseen conditions, but that if the hardy plank is installed, that it reflects what is revealed when the aluminum is removed, if that makes sense. Because that will tell you the corner condition, that will tell you the trim condition at a lot
I
of
mean,
these places.
you have two inside corners there, and actually the bay window, the bow is kind of an inside-outside corner, so you have something, you can have, that's going to be a little bit to mess with right there, just even in terms of terminating the aluminum.
Stipulate that it matches whatever goes back in, it represents what's revealed when the aluminum is removed.
So, okay, so I think we'll go to comments from the public and then comments from the board. Does that make sense? Anybody else have any more questions? Jody?
No.
Am I able to ask one more question related to what Jeff just said?
Today, yes.
So I guess a little more clarity on that, Jeff, if possible. When you say the bow meets the flat, I do think there's a trim there for the aluminum. Are you saying you want to see what happens underneath with the wood siding?
Well, I'm just offering a recommendation as far as the siding is concerned, absent what's going on in court, but as far as the siding is concerned, that maybe the BAR consider a condition that or a recommendation that those trim conditions replicate what's exposed when the aluminum is removed.
Right. In other words, it's not going to mimic the rest of the trim, the aluminum trim. It's going to be
Yeah.
it's going to
You open
it's
that
going to
up,
be
what's
true to
there,
whatever's
right.
underneath it. The question I also have is, I guess I do have one more question. We're talking about the aluminum. Are you going to have to take it all the way up that panel, all the way up to the roof?
Right, I think that's the discussion I'm thinking about, which is if the owner decides to not touch any of the aluminum except we get permission to take the porch out, if that's granted, how we deal with this one area. So
Well, it kind of gets you into 2 walls if you take the porch off.
I think that's probably accurate.
Like all the way, I would say
inside.
all the way up at that point, because you
Right.
have that cheek wall, and you have that wall, and you're going, and actually, does it intersect? It doesn't touch the bow though, right?
Correct. It meets the bow where the bow hits the flat wall. That would be where we would probably stop.
So that gets a little messy probably in terms of where you stop taking off the aluminum.
I think there's a trim piece, an aluminum trim piece where the bow meets the flat, if I can read this.
It looks like just a stand-up. If I'm looking,
It's a joint, I guess.
yeah, it looks like,
Yeah,
it
it's
looks like
just
kind of more like a.
It's probably a fold over or something.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
So basically, it's a trimless joint as it currently exists in aluminum.
right.
Oh, it's here.
So I just don't know how much that unwinds, is all I'm saying.
Sure.
Okay, so I think we can go to the comment stage, because I think right now the crux of the matter is whether the BAR feels it's appropriate to remove the porch or not. But before I go to there, anybody in the public? Jeff, do you want to be the public today? No? Okay. All right, so comments from the board.
I guess I have some issues with, from the staff report, some of the pertinent guidelines for rehabilitation. Namely, do not strip entrances and porches of historic material and details. Do not remove or radically change entrances and porches important in defining the building's overall historic character. The original size and shape of door openings should be maintained, and original door openings should not be filled in. I feel like all those speak to keeping the porch.
And I concur with the guidelines and feel like they're applicable here. This is granted not the main facade of the house, but it's an important facade of the house facing the side street. It was just the drive entrance side of that street, not only for family and staff and service vehicles, but also for guests. And this is an ornamented porch that was elaborated to celebrate someone coming into the house. It connected with the stair and hall center structure in the house. And I believe it's an important historic aspect of the house.
Any other comments?
I tend to agree, and I would just also add that the choice of having that curved facade on this rear back corner underlines the point that it was an important facade and where there was some considerable amount of craft and design thought placed towards this facade.
That curved facade appears to be part of the original dining room. Yeah.
I think also on the question of siding, I think we'd like some more information about the original siding in terms of its shape and primarily its shape, but condition would be nice too.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Anybody care to make a motion?
Well, just to be clear, it looks like this does not have support for removing the porch. I'm reading that correctly from everyone.
That does seem to be the way we're headed, yes.
So, it sounds like we're gonna deny this unless you guys want to, for some reason, request a deferral. I mean, if you'd wanna it sounds like you don't wanna do the siding if you're not gonna do the porch.
So,
we could leave this open indefinitely.
I mean, here's one question I have is, how do we feel about replacing the door with a window?
I'm fine with that. As long as we can keep the door, the existing door opening or frame.
Right, the frame.
And we infill it with a window and appropriate infill.
It may not be relevant because I don't know that there's an interest in
Spending the money
keeping
on.
the window if the porch isn't.
Understood, understood.
Yeah, sure.
Also, the drawings, if you look at I believe the drawings don't show it really in the same place as the door.
Well, the door's off center because of the stairs, so I think that seems like a legitimate location, but it does kind of imply that the door has been there most of its life.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
I mean, if you were to pull it off and find the framing, the opening was centered, then you could reasonably argue that the porch actually wasn't there originally, and that was a later. Yeah, so I mean, that's,
Right.
I mean, that's really the, sort of the character problem that we're facing in terms of our guidelines.
Yeah, I think the design intent was the window would be in the door, where the door is now.
Right, which is pretty clearly, which it pretty clearly is, right, right.
If I can offer, so the options are, you all have it within your decision to defer this. There may be some additional questions, there may be some additional information. You all can defer this by your choice until next month. An applicant or the applicant can request a deferral, in which case it's theirs to bring back when they choose. You can take separate actions, siding, the demolition. You can also, just to be clear, if there is a decision for a denial on one of these, just so everyone knows the rules, that is appealable to council. So if the BAR took an action which is you felt you wish to appeal, that could be done. So those are sort of the four options available, if that'll help.
So if you guys request a deferral, we could leave this open indefinitely, and if you ever decide you want to do the siding, it's part of the same application. Or if you just want us to deny it tonight and you want to take it to council, or just let it die.
So,
I mean, you know, the siding was only ever a side issue anyway.
Right. I think the preference would be to defer, just to keep the discussion open.
meaning you guys would have to defer it in that case, because if we deferred, you only have a month. You have to come back the following.
I think that gives us a little time to just talk it through.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth at least a little bit of exploration there, just
True.
because you've got, if you have the door, if you can, I mean, I guess, what's the inside of it? Is it drywall or plaster? What is the inside of the powder room?
Inside the door?
Inside of the powder room, is it drywall or plaster?
Yeah, inside the house.
Right, right. No, I'm wondering more about looking at what's going on behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, if there,
With a view to what?
Establishing whether that door is, if you're absolutely certain that door location, that door was always there, the framing was all there. If it wasn't, if at some point it actually is a later addition, like came in.
No, the door was always
Yeah, it's on the Sanborn map.
No, I know it is. In that case, it was a stair coming straight. It looks like in the Sanborn map, it actually came straight down to the
Tim,
street.
I'm not sure that that's.
But
the
that's
case.
not necessarily accurate, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't show stairs at all for the other porches, and we know that they
That
had
they had to be
stairs.
there,
So
yeah.
that may be some insignia on the Sanborn map
Yeah.
that talks about the symbol for the type of roof that's on the
Yeah,
porch.
all that's available in the Sanborn is that it's framed because it's yellow. It's got either a closed circle or an open circle, indicates the roof type, and then there's a number 1, which indicates it's a single-story
And I think that's this
addition. And that's all you
1,
can
0.
discern.
Right at that location.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
it looks like it's
a-
steps, but it's not.
Yeah. But the
Right.
0 simply means it's, I believe, open. It means it's some sort of a
It's either
asphalt.
flammable or not
Yeah,
flammable.
right.
and the one just means one story.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking the fact that it appeared to extend, that's all, but not so much though, but, so, I think,
Yeah, if you guys want to appeal this to council, you'd want us to deny it. If you want to leave it open so that, you know, someday if you decide to change the siding, just leave it open and request a deferral from us.
Sounds like the deferral gives us 1 month. and then
If you request it,
No.
it's whenever you want to come back.
It's unlimited if you request it. It's 1
It's
month
a-
if we request it.
Yeah.
you have to reapply, you have to represent in next month.
It seems logical to just request a deferral. Yeah.
I move to accept the applicant's request for deferral.
Anyone
Second.
it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Yep.
You guys need to save some work for some other architects.
Oh, my. Well, good, we're exposing to all the different opportunities here tonight. All right, so, last action item on the agenda, this is 409 Ridge Street. As you all know, 409 Ridge Street had been an 1842 home, the Duncombe Spooner Brown House, but in 1994, a big tree fell on top of it. And what you have today is...
Tree wasn't preservation.
That's right. They didn't have a COA for that tree removal, I don't think. And, but the current house was constructed in 2004. It is still within the ADC district, and it is still considered a contributing property. But regardless of when it was built, again, the BAR, new construction and alteration to an existing structure is still subject to BAR review. So this is a request for a COA within an ADC district for alterations to the rear or west elevation, including construction of a 2-story addition and porch, and construction on the side, that would be the north elevation of a single-story mudroom entry. Maybe there's one on Park Street that they can move here, I don't know. But staff, in reviewing this, it's a little, difficult trying to decide what do we apply to this. This is not a rehabilitation of a historic structure, but it is within the ADC district. So we're referring to the new construction guidelines, and we did. Excuse me, I'm reading the motion here, and this is, of all the things that I checked, it's an old motion. So forgive me, when you make the motion, it is in the Ridge Street ADC district, and what we applied were the addition section of the design guidelines, which is in new construction. So that said, in the context of the existing additions at the rear and side to the 2004 brick house, staff finds the proposed work to be consistent with the character of the 2004 house. In addition, the house roof will be replaced with standing seam metal, which will also be installed onto the new work. The brick foundation of the house is continued for the additions, and the proposed painted siding is consistent with the existing additions, and those distinguish them from the brick house. The application clearly communicates a sense of the project's scale, materiality, and general appearance, which staff finds consistent with the design guidelines. However, the application lacks several specific details, bless you, including door and window cut sheets, drawings of the new operable shutters, detailed drawings of new porch, stair, and railings, specifically some trim details. Again, while the building is not historic, it is within a district. The BAR may request further details to better understand those elements.
you all can review this with the information available. Again, you also have the prerogative to request a deferral until the March meeting if there's any additional information you'd like to see. So any questions for me?
We're looking at Ridge Street, right? All right, I'm looking at the suggested motion.
Ignore that.
Ignore it? Oh, thank you.
Just change the word rehabilitations to new construction and additions.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks have been a little bit busy with the goings-on at Fort Square, so I apologize for my misstep on this one.
Excuse.
Yeah, I know. It's been quite a week and a half. But yes, the motion would be guidelines for additions and consistent with what's in the Ridge Street ADC district. So that part is correct.
Okay, questions from the public? Okay, no public. Questions from the board? Yes. Do we have a presenter?
Do we have a presenter? Sorry.
Jeff, are you a presenter? You're being so quiet back there.
So my name is Jeff Bushman, Bushman Dreyfus Architects, again tonight, and happy to take any questions you have.
Great, thank you. Just kind of to clarify, on y'all's drawing set, you've got a note that the front steps, new stairs and railing, but that was not in your application description that I could find. So I just didn't know if y'all were intending on wanting to replace those.
There's a cover letter attached, which
I
has...
couldn't find it in the cover letter either.
I think that and I somewhat realized this yesterday, that the cover letter and there were 10 application copies, 10 cover letters, they were all sort of stapled together, and the drawings were separate. So when I pulled those apart, the one I saw there is this narrative. So my apologies for that, but yes, it is in the narrative.
Is it in the narrative?
Yeah,
I don't know if that got...
It is your intention.
We could have a recitation of the cover letter.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think I've got the cover letter, and I just, in the...
Yeah, I mean, in a way,
I'm not necessarily objecting, I
interesting
just think we
project.
should make sure it's clarified.
Partially just maintenance and repair. The roof is leaking, the existing deck is falling apart and falling off with a kind of terrible vinyl screwed together technology. So we're fixing some things up, including the front stair. The other part of it is just to do some plan modifications and make it suitable for a growing family that likes strong connection to the outdoors, hence the big porch. And the third, I think, worth mentioning intention is just to take this house, which wasn't that, I mean, the massing is fine, it's perfectly great on the street, but we just wanted to make it more attractive, more beautiful, more finely detailed, and bring it up to snuff, give it a chance. So there's kind of that's a three-legged stool that we're working on. So the front steps, it's not really new, it's just a repair.
Okay.
So they'll basically look like what exists when they're done.
Almost exactly
Okay.
what the cover photograph shows.
It's easy enough.
That's maintenance.
Yeah. Did you have any responses to some of staff's questions? I think they referred to, where'd you put your discussion? You just read through this.
Window details?
Yeah,
I mean, can you just describe the windows?
Yeah.
Yeah, the windows, I mean, the existing windows are a nice builder quality double hung. The existing shutters are the low end of builder quality, they're just screwed to the wall. So we want to take those off all around the house and make them traditional operating unhinged shutters with shutter bangs and, so the louvers go the right way.
Radical.
Yeah, so it's very conservative modifications, really. In terms of the new windows, We haven't picked the exact make and model and manufacturer, but our intention is to go with energy efficient, true divided light, double on in keeping with the existing house, but larger so you can tell the difference from new from old. And clad aluminum white on the exterior.
Okay.
So it'll be
By true divided light, you mean SDLs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the detailing, very traditional brick mold, with the term, for what we would expect on a federal style structure like this.
Jeff, in the backyard, there's in a couple of the renderings in the plan, there's a second set of site walls and another lower stair. Is that existing, or is that also part of the?
That all will be new. There's a separate landscape project, which isn't drawn here, isn't really designed yet, but that second set of walls is important to us because we're trying to reduce the height of the back stair to the back garden.
Right.
So the porch actually steps down one from the primary level of the house. The primary landing of the stair steps down one from the porch.
Oh, yeah.
And we've
No, it
reduced.
makes a lot of sense. I think that's good to know. It's just probably more of an issue of documentation, so that the city has a record of site plan changes.
Just out of curiosity, what is all the scaffolding that's on the house? What's going on?
It's gone there.
We're putting down a bird flew into, there's a dryer vent that's upstairs,
Uh-huh.
and a bird flew into the vent, so we had to stop it up, and then we couldn't find anyone around town who wanted to deal with putting a dryer vent on the second story, so my husband had to put scaffolding up and do it himself. But
Oh, okay.
like all the country every week, so it's been a slow project.
I just noticed there were vines on one of the pictures. There's vines growing halfway up on
yeah.
the scaffold. So, okay, I'm just curious.
It was maintenance for the bird.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Two-year dryer vent installation.
Yeah, well, DIY, that's what
Sorry,
happens.
I cannot comment.
So it's a good reminder to clean your dryer vents regularly. It's one of the biggest fire hazards, so. It's,
It's clean.
yeah, there you go.
Thank you for the PSA.
I just cleaned mine, so I'm spreading the word.
So that's what the bird did.
Yes, the
In
bird.
the old days, they used geese for cleaning out flues, chimney flues. In fact, we have a company that it's called Black Goose, and so you used a bird to clean out your dryer vent.
My mental image right now is, I'm very confused. After the meeting, I think I need an explanation.
Judy on a lead here.
Happy to provide.
Who was it that was standing in front of the turkey getting stuffed in that was some political photo a while back. It was pretty funny.
Okay.
But anyway, digress. So, all right, so do we have any more questions for Jeff?
Oh, the one other question I have is the connection of the rear roof line with the existing roof line. Seems like it's going to be a tricky figuring out how to deal with the overhang and what that intersection looks like. Do you have any further thoughts about that or description?
Yeah, I mean, our intention there is clear. Just because of the floor-to-floors, I mean, you can see it in some of our drawings.
Oh, I see. There's a
A13.
small return.
The overhang on the porch is bigger than the overhang on the house. I forget the exact dimension. But we are attempting to line them up as much as we can, if not precisely. But there's some roof water we have to deal with there, and I think that's actually a fortuitous event. So we're building a notch, putting a weatherhead there to catch the roof water, and then putting it into a drain pipe at that notch.
Okay.
Where the water.
Where the
from
valley comes?
Existing roof, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
valley, and the
Yeah.
new roof come together. I mean, the other design detail that isn't super clear, which actually makes us happy, the existing house, the first floor is about 2 feet bigger towards the back than the upper floor. And if you look at the existing condition photographs, The original designer builder had a kind of addition on the back, which was lumpy and bumpy, a little bit bigger over by the kitchen, a little bit smaller, to accommodate that additional space in the living room. We're trying to clean that up. I mean, in a way, a federal-style house would be. The corners go all the way down to the ground. So in this elevation, the bottom, you see that little vertical stripe of siding on the back between the porch and the house. On the lower level, that's actually interior space. But on the upper level, that's exterior space in order to just clean up the lines of the elevation. And it also makes a place to attach the downside to.
Vicious. Okay. Comments from the public? There's no public again. Comments from the board?
So to follow up on Breck's comment, in the design guide or review guidelines for additions, attachments to existing buildings, the new design should not use the same wall plane, roof line, or cornice line of the existing. So I'm curious if you were to squeeze the width of the addition in just slightly, would that then help the roof line issue?
I think it would be exactly the same. In fact, if I understand your question correctly, we recently added a few feet to the addition just to improve the proportions of the dining room, which is now just a square on the far side. But our approach to the cornice line has been consistent. The profile of the cornice is different, the size and shape and dimensions of it are different. So the only thing that really lines up is just the bottom of the soffit. They don't really touch. They're clearly different periods and eras coming together.
I actually think, I kind of disagree with staff on this one, that I don't think we should be looking at the additions guidelines. I think we should just be looking at new construction, period. Because it's a new house with an addition on it, but the whole thing as a whole is still, it's not like we're adding on anything historic.
True.
So, at least that's how I'm reviewing this in that sense.
I find it a stretch, actually, even though it's in an ADC district, that's even considered a contributing structure.
I think that must have been a mistake.
Yeah, I don't understand how it's a contributing structure.
When was the district formed? I can't remember.
They may have not been updated since
The tree fell.
Yeah, that's possible.
I think that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it just doesn't bear the scrutiny from my point of view.
No.
So,
I mean, nothing against your design ideas.
I don't.
I was just trying to respond to the
No,
guideline.
no, it's good. It's good. And I'm just, yeah.
If you guys, you look on page A4, it was
Which page?
A4.
What are we looking
And
for?
this, it was a little bit of an optical illusion, and Jeff just, it kind of all makes sense now. You see that addition of the brick foundation continues for whatever reason. So that sort of establishes that outside wall. So I think, to Jane's question, coming in, comes inside where that wall is. So that line of the addition is almost sort of, well, you could say dictated by that brick wall.
I mean,
if that makes sense.
Yes, so I did misunderstand your question. You were referring to making the width of the porch less. So as you come back from the walls of the house, it would step in.
Just slightly, yeah.
Right.
And I guess.
Sure, if
the
this
reason-
was an existing old house that had an intact shape.
Be more important.
But the fact is, the living room is continuing straight on through and out.
I see.
So to push that in would
A little
have some
jog.
plan implications there.
Yeah.
Would
And I
be
guess
positive.
it may be just personal, but from the front elevation, you kind of have these little ears that are sticking out.
Yeah.
But
I mean, as it
you're-
is, we're sensitive to
you're right, you made a
the
break.
subtleties of materials. Changing the brick mortar, the brick pattern just a little bit. You can never match brick anyway, so if you make a reveal there, step it back an inch or two, as we're doing with the siding, change material. I mean, I think it's clear
Yes.
where the difference between old and new is.
I think the material differentiation clearly makes it an addition. I mean, just simply the form of the building and all that. So I don't really have an issue there. And yeah, if it was really an historic house, I'd like to see more push in terms of how differentiated the addition might be, but don't think this is an issue with this house to start with.
I agree, and I think it's overall just an elegant approach, and well documented and very clear, pretty easy to approve from my point of view.
I think it's it actually seems to do more justice to the original house than the current structure does, in the way that it's the original one had the 2-story porches and a lot more openness to it, and this seems to almost be more in keeping with that. I mean, if you wanted to encapsulate the entire house with, it'd probably be for that, but I'm not gonna. I can't spend your money, so.
And they just put in a new dryer vent, so it goes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion, having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including city design guidelines for new construction and additions, I move to find the proposed additions satisfy the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the Ridge Street ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted.
I want to just make some amendments, if that's all right.
Yep.
Just that when you do figure out what the windows are, you submit them to staff to confirm that they adhere to our guidelines. Are there other items that we need to see?
A site plan or a landscape plan should be submitted either as a amendment to this application or I'm not sure what the process is, but for those lower site walls and for a record of what the changes are to the landscape, we should have
Yeah,
those.
we should definitely see those. And also, concurrent with that, any exterior lighting, big surprise. If you decide to do that
Nothing
in the
remarkable,
landscape plan.
just to code to light the front porch and the interior of the back porch, because there is doors, so.
So, do we want to review this site plan? If we do, we should not be approving this tonight.
Well, here's where, I mean, if there is, you all can be reviewing landscaping, I think to some extent, in ADC district, I have okayed some things administratively after talking with you all. So I think there was the thing that Mary Wolf did over on University Circle was one that I was able to. So
If I may say, there's really no rear yard project yet.
Mhm.
There is a landscape architect yet to be determined to come in and get that done. So the lower wall is simply us establishing an elevation for that project to work to.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be satisfied with the drawings as they are, as long as we had that. It's not identified in the drawings, so if that was submitted to, as part of the for record.
Okay,
that'd be fine
just for
with
Jeff to confirm that it matches kind of what we've looked at tonight.
I accept those friendly amendments, and we're still looking for a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
free
you.
to, you're free to roam.
Thank you.
Say hi to Jeff.
Will do.
Of course, hey, Jeff, one thing I'd just say about lighting, there is no code. There really is no code about lighting. That's one of the problems. And, you have building codes, but
Building
we don't have really good lighting codes. I know you do. But I didn't want to go there in the middle of your motion. All right, so what have we got here?
All right, so there is no
Preliminary discussion from West Main. Okay.
612 West Main.
Still have Hazel, don't we?
The media, decided to leave.
That was a consent agenda.
Oh, that was not, all right.
We learned something new tonight about, use of gooses, or geese. I'm gonna, and, not Jody.
I still think Jody's fooling with me. Totally confused.
It's,
Thank you. I'm expecting it's a
So
word
just-
that is used. Never mind.
It was a bird.
Oh, I see. So quickly, just,
At least she was amusing.
I have two questions, just to offer some direction from some folks who contacted us. Most of you know this is Don Dougal's house, University Circle. Don came in to talk to us, I think a week ago. Over the holidays, he received a notice from his insurer saying, your porches, despite their historic character, they said that if you don't do something, we're canceling insurance at the end of January. So Don in sort of, I don't know what to do, went to Lowe's and constructed this on a temporary basis so that his insurance would not be canceled. But you all know that that's certainly not what he wants to have on his porch. I suggested, well, can you raise the yard? Would that work? But he's now stuck with having to create some type of railing for these two porches. Other than the sort of the pallet construction that you see there, what I told him, I would ask you all. My suggestion was something within the columns he agreed. I said it could even be contemporary, could be even invisible. Maybe wired. The cable that we see a lot of, or just simply some quarter-inch metal rod, as long as it meets code provisions. But I said I would ask you all if you had any thoughts, and maybe as he works on some drawings to submit to you all, if you had any opinions.
How would code deal with this, given that it's a grandfathered situation?
Code is irrelevant. There is no railing there, so this would be
I
a new
understand.
railing.
I'm just trying to think, for instance, if you were to go to historic precedent and, like, say, put a Chinese fence or something like that, similar to what you see on the lawn, right, on a pavilion, which does not meet code.
Correct.
But he's not modifying, I guess it'd be a question for Francis. And
we talked to, this is a requirement of the insurer.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So it would be new, and he would have to construct something that's per
Meets
current
code,
code.
so
Correct.
it's got to meet the
Whatever the height, the
4-inch
width,
roll.
and height off the
Drives me
floor.
crazy.
So, I think he wants to do something as minimal as possible. And he said this is what he kind of came up with in the sense of, I've got to do something. I read the letter. It was somewhat alarming, the language that was used, but he at least kept his insurance. So I just wanted to make sure that is there. You can't really say no. I think he's somewhat, so what is it that?
I'd be inclined to say iron pickets, just dead simple, and it's black.
That's how they approach. They need to make some modifications, but that's the approach of the bank building downtown.
Yeah.
Kind of goes away, sits.
But not aluminum things that are like this,
Right.
but something that's more like a wrought iron, very slender, but still have to meet the code. But just black and as simple as all get out.
I can't see his front door or his front step railings, but I imagine that's
They look
probably
like they're
similar
iron.
to what Tim has just described.
Well, and that gets into the historic character of it, and I would. He has the original drawings, and so it would be almost to say, don't try to simulate the front porch rail. Because you don't want to confuse it with the original design. So.
I know that these are probably more obtrusive, but they would be more removable. Would be like planters that you just said.
That would they asked and it didn't
Didn't
fly.
Okay.
No. And I urged Don to sort of explore some other options. Maybe explain. Find another insurer. But I think he's somewhat at the point of I just need to resolve this.
I think something simple, black and metal, would
Okay.
probably be really easy to approve.
Beautiful.
Just
Okay.
keep it simple.
Next headache or question. This is like fan mail.
That address doesn't seem to be right. That's like I looked that up. It's
I
right
know.
across
Circle, it's not Avenue.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
My
This one is-
I apologize.
It's been a rough 2 weeks.
It has. Robert's been in there with me. Plus, he and I both.
Do we need to make a plaque for you two?
We took a 4-day weekend, so I was in Clemson Friday, and we just.
Now we understand.
Man, it was
You have lacrosse brain.
Can you believe it? You know, my son is, he only has 2 more games down there at home game. I'm like, man, all right, there we go. All right, and there are 3 images with it. All right, you put them together. That's all right, that's all right. This works.
Still not 20 University.
It's still not on University Avenue, but that's okay. Ignore that. And it's,
Sorry.
This is University Circle.
It's correct on your agendas,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
you should have printed out.
the words coming out of my mouth. Listen to what I say, not what I do.
It's in the back of the Jefferson Theater.
So,
Old creperie.
right. So I got a call, actually about an hour before the meeting, and some folks are going to be putting a noodle shop into this, I don't even know what you would call it.
It's a creperie.
Yeah, so what is this extension? It's what was it we looked at last time? It's not a courtyard, it's an anti-courtyard. It projects from the building. But what you've got there are, there's 2 awnings. They're cable supported or more of a rod supported awnings. One over the service window, and then the other around the side, which is full length but a lot shorter. The question was, can they wrap this with an L-shaped awning? And I sort of did my best to just sort of illustrate that on the right. Looking at the images, and they're both of these awnings are in bad shape, so I could see that repairing them and replacing them could be necessary one way or the other. She did ask if the one that's on the side, that would be the east elevation, it's very, the headroom there is low, so that one idea is to elevate that. I asked if maybe they consider just simply 2 separate awnings, and maybe the one on the east side elevated, but at least extend the one on the front. So I said I would float that before you all, see if you had any thoughts on it. And I think just sort of in the vein of trying to continue to squeeze life out of a historic structure that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of options for it. There's some merit in the request. I don't know, given the what you can see in the photograph with the rod that supports that awning, I would say that there's definitely some historic character there to be maintained. But with that, I just wondered what your thoughts might be.
It's so friggin' charming. Like I love that little building. Mm-hmm. And it seems, I have to kind of put that away if they want to do something different, because I'm sure the awnings that are there they're old, but who knows if they're probably weren't original. Anyways,
Well,
I wish they wouldn't.
The one awning in the front, the one on the narrow facade strikes me as being nowhere near the quality level. It looks pretty haphazard relative to the long one. Am I incorrect about that?
They both have that same rod suspension on one end.
The one looks like it's just
But
made
the
out of sheet.
the
It doesn't have any
photograph
structure.
and I was saying the photographs, they both look very rough. I would say they are both old, but Jefferson Theater is not. I think it's a 1920s structure. So, old may not mean original, but there is character to that construction. So one question would be the idea of an L shape of a wrap around the corner. Yes or no? Let me ask you that. And then the other would be to raise in the act of repairing the long roof in elevating it while maintaining some of that that rod construction.
So how high is it right now? 9.5 feet?
No. It's like just slightly above 6.
Really? Oh, I guess.
And do we know much about the use of, or what that original bump out was built for?
You know, there's nothing, I mean, there's a door there. I don't know. You know, having wandered inside that building with Mike Ball, you know, it's almost like a building that every 5 years some appendage grew out of it somewhere. God only knows. But you know, I can look into the record. I mean, those are questions to answer, and like I said, I got this call about 3:30. So.
I mean, for me, if we had some confidence that these are not, you know, have a particular special function or use that's, you know, connected to the building, not original, I could see a contemporary awning being installed in this building really easily. I think that there's something really nice about it being cantilevered off the volume and not having a set of columns that starts to create a new facade. Allows you to see the volume of that older structure. But it feels like I need a little more information about where they came from.
Is there a second floor in that box?
Yeah.
There is a window, yeah, beneath the foliage.
There is actually like if you go order a crepe someday, the ceiling's pretty low, and there's definitely space up there.
Because that window head's at 6 feet.
No, it's tall. I mean, that's
it must
taller
be
than
like
6.
at least 8-ish.
I bet the side
They're
one is
really
7, and
scrawny.
the one that's in front
No,
might be 8.
she's
They're usually sitting down in
Do you
there.
step down?
This is about just
Maybe.
over 7, I believe she said, and this is like just under 6.
Because
I can stand up under there.
the window is, there's no way that window head is at 6 feet, is there? I guess I'll have to go look.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's right. I know I can stand up.
That
on
looks
the
like 9
far
feet
right
to
side,
me where that one,
but
the short one is. Count the bricks.
Yeah,
Do you have a sense of how tall that light
like
pole
to be-
is?
And if you look at the neighboring door on the left, that door seems to be, 7 feet taller.
yeah, maybe you do step down from the sidewalk.
I feel like you do, but
I'd like to be convinced that the existing awnings are too severely damaged to be kept or repaired.
I think there's 9 risers.
Yeah. And the bottom one's pretty short.
You know,
It really kind of depends on what the grade's doing, but it just seems hard to believe that's only 6 feet. But what Jody just said, I think really makes, my inclination is to think that the one on the right is really the one that's been around, and the other one was kind of an afterthought, but I could be wrong, but I guess we really need to know a little more about it.
Oh, where'd you get that?
Yeah, so that's not 7 feet. That might be, they're right there, that tracking across, that might be 7 feet, that's at least 9, if not 9.5.
I love them.
Cuter without the vines.
Yeah, I love them.
you youngsters and your technologies.
Looked up the
Man.
flat.
Yeah, I would say it's, at least in the street view photograph, relatively primitive, simple construction, and it looks rough. All right, so I want to find out, what was its, was this, both of them, what's their nature, what's their condition, head height, as far as wrapping the corner. It sounds, if anything were done, it would be 2 separate awnings, not.
That would be my preference, but I don't know how. I mean, like, I'd have to look at the guidelines and see how this ends up. If it ends up being like if both of those roofs are, built in the last 20 years, and it sounds like, the guidelines probably don't have anything that say you can't wrap something around it. But personally, I wish that the new owners would at least consider the fact that it is kind of charming looking as it is, and they put some cheesy commercial wraparound awning on it. It's gonna lose that.
I think if they were gonna do a new awning, they'd have to, assuming that it's got some historic relevance, that they would mimic that construction, so it would continue to have the kind of, quasi-industrial
Yeah.
crudity to it, not some, new shopfront related
Right.
canopy. It-
All right. I mean, some homework prior. I didn't get the sense there's urgency. This was just the owner of the business going in there, not the building owner. So presumably there's some, there was an offer to do something.
All right, anything else?
No. I didn't attend place. I don't know if anybody else did.
No, I wrote a synopsis for Mike, but I don't know if he kicked it out for us. But just the lighting is sort of getting something of a groundswell right now. Sean Tubbs, I think you all know, is trying to sort of get some interest going from the Piedmont Environmental Council's point of view. So he's starting to talk to a lot of people. And there are a couple of people in the county now, in county government, that are interested in revisiting the dark sky ordinances, which are pretty old at this point. But Phil Ayana, who is a professor emeritus, and Ricky Barnett, who is a current astronomy professor, are both very much behind that. Mark Schuyler is working with them as well, and Andrew Monshine is. Andrew and I are sort of the representatives from Place that are trying to help spearhead the lighting thing. But we're trying to. The county seems to be more receptive to the idea right now, actually, than the city. But at the same time, the city has all sorts of crosswalk and lighting issues and things like that that just are not being dealt with in our life safety issues, particularly the crosswalks. The blinding lights I have a problem with. I mean, I think, basically blinding somebody just before they get to a pedestrian walk. Yeah, there's pedestrian, but good luck seeing them at this point. I mean, that technology seems to be pretty wrong-headed to me. But in addition to that, Mark Schuyler has been hired by the Downtown Business Association to start looking at decorative lighting strategies and lighting. He's trying to expand the brief a little bit, but basically they want to, because they're not satisfied with the city's progress in that department, they're trying to come up with a more sophisticated way to deal with lighting on the mall. And so they're actually willing to pay for it. So I think there is some critical mass beginning to happen. I mean, there's a kind of half-assed lighting study that the city did about 3 years ago that didn't really go anywhere. Intentions might have been good, but I don't think the right people weren't asked, the right questions weren't asked, so on and so forth. So I'm hoping that we'll start to get some critical mass and make something happen. It doesn't help that I haven't been around much, so my ability to kind of bulldog things is a little limited at the moment. And then the same thing goes for the 3D plan. I mean, UVA sort of produced their thing. We had it, and then we, and the one GIS guy, I can't remember his name, tried to go at it, but he really didn't have the skill set for taking the model the next step, and so it never really got funded. And staff certainly has enough to do. I mean, it's something that would really require hiring at least a consultant or a specific staff member to carry the ball a ways and really incorporate that. But that's something we've been asking for a while now, is the ability to start really seeing the city three-dimensionally and seeing it three-dimensionally in zoning relative to the comprehensive plan and all that. I think that's the only way the public's going to start to understand the implications of our zoning codes. So it needs to happen, but it's kind of stillborn at the moment.
All right. Just to bring you all up to speed on, the plaque that was in the sidewalk.
The one that got ripped off.
Was removed, which created, there was quite a bit going on, quite a bit happening, and it happened to be on a day that Brian Wheeler was not here, and so it was just the emails and phone calls were coming. It was interesting, and then I think it happened on a Thursday. Then walking into work on Monday, I think it was. There's somebody decided. Well, someone had installed their own version of a plaque, which created again another stir. The city removed it. Last week, the Historic Resource Committee had a lengthy discussion about the markers, which you've been hearing about, and we're beginning to bring that to a close. They'd also like to at least have some sort of plaque in that location or near that location, but the idea being that it would be elevated up out of the ground. And so I did just a couple sketch ideas of something that would wouldn't be flat, up and out. We would have to determine what would be the ADA requirements for that, but something that would, on a temporary interim basis, at least still memorialize that location. And as you all know, there were locations throughout Court Square where the buying and selling of enslaved people occurred. This is just one location that has been identified as having a block.
The statue in, where's, the one, the tubular bell statue, is that outside of Atlanta, Birmingham? Do you know the one I mean? That was just recently completed, and I think they have like a tubular bell for each town. I don't know whether Charlottesville rated in that.
Well, what's going on with?
Yeah, I just can't remember.
So this is the plaque, and so its location, and I'll share that with you all. I mean, so it may be something BAR wants to speak on. I know last night council discussed it, but that's the current discussion. Public Works was supposed to have bricked in the opening, so that hopefully to discourage the continued creativity that we're seeing there. As far as a permanent, a more substantive, appropriate memorial to the enslaved population, that goes back to the Blue Ribbon Commission's recommendation of something that's done through the design process and an RFP. So that and the statues, what's happening with the statues, push that over here for this time. It would just be that in the interim, the committee and I believe council last night agreed that something should be in that location to indicate that this was one of the locations of the auctions.
What's the material of the base that would for interim?
It would
solution?
be I said that, explained to the committee that the width is what imagine what's necessary for someone with a guide dog or with a cane or so that they can someone visually impaired can notice that is there. So there's a width that we would have to have that could be possibly a solid stone, almost like an obelisk, with a plaque on it, or something that's just a simple metal frame. I think
they agreed to a metal frame. I'm kind of imagining it like the Civil War signs with the 45-degree plaques that you see on the side of the road.
So, and so that would be, and because of and where would it go and how would it be anchored needs to be worked out. But the idea is to make as minimal as possible because it's intended as a temporary placement of the plaque. What is coming forward would be the markers, the replacements of those black markers. And what we're working towards now is installing them on a light post. And Fred Wolf had done a design of a bracket that could be mounted on them, really to get them off the buildings. There's still 3 remaining. And so really get it into the public right away, not up on the side of somebody's building, not making any more holes in historic brick. So, but we'll be bringing those to you, I think, probably within the next 3 months as we continue on that. So that's just a little bit of a update on what's been going on in Court Square. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's generated a lot of discussion, a lot of people asking, and so in that to be able to offer people information. And I think again the narrative of we know that a slave auction block, a piece of stone. There are reports of one existing there at just south of Number Nothing. I also know of one in front of the hotel, which is just across the street. We also know of these auctions occurring all around Court Square. Some on benches, some even reported on tree stumps. So we want to be careful to say, this is the spot where these things occurred when it occurred throughout. Yet there is something important about this site. It does, it identifies a a specific physical location. So sort of, it happened here, very important, but yes, everywhere. So that's the narrative we're hoping to communicate. And, you know, if you all have any questions, if folks ask you what's going on, you can certainly direct them to me or Robert. And but that's just a quick update. Thank you for being patient. And that's all.
Well, if it's at the risk of extending the meeting, at the last meeting we had a preservation happenings update, and I just thought it would be a nice practice to continue. So feel free to share any events or ongoing things that are happening related to preservation in the area. I'd just like to remind you that on March 6th is the Preserving African American Historic Places Conference, hosted by DHR and Preservation Virginia. I think Brett, Jody, Ron and I will be going from the BAR. And then also there are 3 CLG training sessions for BAR members hosted by DHR on March 23rd, March 24th, and May the 15th. I'm going to the May 15th one in Williamsburg. But if you're interested in going, I can send you the registration forms for that.
Actually, the museum, the sculpture I was trying to remember is called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is but regarding lynching.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's sort of these Corten steel weights on cables. It's quite powerful.
That's in Atlanta?
It's in Montgomery. Montgomery, Alabama.
And my understanding is that soil was collected in Charlottesville for that project.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It was from the location out near Farmington, where they were able to identify where the gentleman was pulled from the train. So there is dirt from that side. Soil, sorry.
So the only other thing I was just going to say is if anybody wants to, if you want to be on the sort of the email chain for the lighting stuff, just send me a request. I won't broadcast it to the whole BAR just because we get enough emails that way. But if you want to just send me an email and I'll hand you over to Sean Tubbs.
I'm interested, but
yeah,
I closed my computer. I'll try to.
Because I guess my fantasy is that ultimately we'll end up with a zoning, a lighting zoning code very similar to Edinburgh's, which is done by residential and commercial, and so everything's really codified, and there's a way to approach lighting that isn't as haphazard as ours is.
Is this something that you guys would, so we've got a firm that is rewriting our zoning code within the next 2 years.
That would be.
Is that something that you guys would work in concert with?
Yeah, I would think so. That's
okay.
A good idea.
Because I think it's all part of the whole comp plan. They're not rewriting the zoning code, I don't think, but I think it's going to be like well, they don't know what they're doing yet. I think that was the outcome of that meeting. It's trying to figure out engagement and branding for the process for the next 2 years for the comp plan.
Where's our favorite bridge these days?
Where?
Well, I mean, I know where it's supposed to go. I was just thinking more about, what's its.
It's being shipped from China.
They're pulling together the bid documents, which do illustrate that.
Connection?
No, the striations.
Oh, I see.
The question will come in, and I talked to Jeanette about this. When the contractor, when the contract's awarded, then however they propose, whatever technique they use to construct those panels, that's when we would step in again to sort of, they would be actual shop drawings. Right now, they're still, even though they're on the drawings and they're to a certain level of detail shown, it's still something that will come down to a shop drawing submittal and of what a particular manufacturer.
And then they'll submit actual samples and so on.
Yeah. So that's how I kind of because when I looked at the drawings, I saw the striations, did everything we asked it to do, but knowing that that's where they'll be bidding to a contractor will bid to a project that will produce that appearance, then we would get involved with that the shop drawing review, make sure RA said, enough of these, or is it, just doing the right things in the right places? So that detail we would be consulted with.
And then was that condition at Water Street finally resolved? I mean, we saw, I just remember seeing a couple of solutions go by and we commented, but I never.
It didn't seem to be, I don't know, ask me that tomorrow. Let me go look at that
And
tomorrow.
then the other thing I'll just ask you is where they stand with lighting, because I think trying to if the Downtown Business Association is really trying to achieve something, it might be worth talking about.
Right now, I mean, the lighting, you all addressed that with what's going over the bridge and what is coming up from Water Street. But I haven't had any discussion with Jed about incorporating what's going on the mall or anything like that. So, good questions for me.
I'm just thinking we still have lots of different things going all over the place. That's all.
Agreed.
Anyway, so everybody ready to end this game?
I'm to adjourn.
Adjourned.
Jeff.